Hey there, Internet friends, and welcome to the 6th episode of That Ultimate Video Game List Show. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey from ThatNerdySite.com, and this is the show where each season me and a panel of friends try to create the ultimate top 20 video game list with two main bits of criteria. Only one game per franchise, and only one game per console. Joining me on this first season are three of my fellow nerds from That Nerdy Site, Logan Wilkinson.
How's it going?
Good, how you doing, Logan?
Doing fantastic.
Excellent, excellent. I've got Cameron Abbott with us.
Pop open a cold one, buddies. This is going to be good.
Cameron always bringing the props. And Frank Bizzani.
What's up, nerds?
What is up? Some housekeeping to start us off real quick. You can find this show each week on podcast services and on YouTube. Please rate, review, like, and subscribe everywhere you can to help us conquer the algorithms that are out there. If you enjoy the chaos that you're about to hear, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So the way the show works is like this. Each week, the panel will take turns adding a round of games to the list. Once a game is added, all other games from that franchise and that console are out of the running. Games can be submitted, however, for any console that they have been released on, including remasters, but collections of games are not allowed. Once we've got 20 games selected, which will happen by the end of this episode, the panel, we will then shift into ranking the list, and our top game at the end of everything will be retired into our Hall of Fame. So a quick recap of previous episodes before we dive into this one, just to list out the games for anybody new or anybody who hasn't been keeping up. In the first week, we had Persona 4 Golden, Final Fantasy VI, The Last of Us, and BioShock. Week 2 brought God of War from 2018, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Pokemon Soul Silver, and Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, but that was vetoed by Cameron. That would have been the PlayStation 1 game. Then Week 3 gave us Super Mario Galaxy 2, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Mass Effect 2, and Portal 2. Week 4 gave us Chrono Trigger, which was vetoed by me. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 for the Dreamcast made its return and made it onto the list. I submitted The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, which was vetoed by Frank. And then Logan rounded us out that week with Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Then last week we had The Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker. Earthbound finally made its way on as our Super Nintendo game. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, and Cameron brought Tetris Effect for the PlayStation VR. So with all of the vetoes, we still have 3 games to add to the list, so that has brought us to this extra kind of bonus week of game selection. And that's what we're about to do today. So it's going to go me, Logan, Cam, and then if Logan uses his remaining veto to take any other games any of those games off the list, Frank will get the final selection. And that'll bring us up to 20. And then next week we will dive into our basically 4 weeks of ranking this list, starting next week with games 20 through 16. We'll kind of rank the bottom of the list, working our way up. So that's where we're at. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. The game that I am submitting to the group today. Let me tell you a story real quick. So back when I was a senior in high school graduation, we did a thing called Project Graduation.
Yep.
This was 2003, and at Project Graduation, like the parent-teacher council or whatever, they basically were able to secure a whole bunch of things that they gave away as raffles. And at this Project Graduation thing, we went to Castles and Coasters, a little like amusement park here in town, and basically it was, hey, after graduation, go to this thing so you're not out tempted to drink and drive or do any, reckless stuff like that. All the students were locked into Castles and Coasters overnight, and one of the things that they did was they set up these raffles where everybody had tickets to put in for various items. The big one was like a 42-inch TV or something like that. But one of the ones I put in for and was ultimately fortunate enough to win was an Xbox, the original Xbox. I had a PlayStation 2 and a GameCube at that time, and didn't really have much of an interest in getting an Xbox, and probably would not have gotten one had I not won this competition, or the raffle, and been randomly selected to go home with an Xbox. So yay. With that Xbox came a couple games. I want to say Elder Scrolls 3 and Burnout, and I didn't really play either of those. In fact, I ended up returning Burnout for the game that I am going to submit, and that is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic.
Okay.
This is the game that, for me, certainly put BioWare into like my sphere of recognition. I had heard good things about it as it came out. I think right around this time. I think it might have come out like a little bit after this. So I was a little late in returning Burnout, but it reviewed well, and I was a huge Star Wars fan, of course, growing up. So Knights of the Old Republic was something I had been like eagerly awaiting and would have sadly missed because it did not come to the other consoles. It was an Xbox exclusive of that era. So yeah, I bought it, played it, loved it. It was a great Star Wars story. They did a very smart thing, I think, of setting it millennia before kind of the current saga that we really follow. A longer time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Basically, I want to say it's like 4,000 years before the rise of the Empire, effectively, and but still with Jedi and Sith and its own version of kind of an imperial war going on. So it was really cool that let them play with like new different designs and new character models and different races and stuff that we hadn't really spent too much time with in any of the games up to that point. I very much love the RPG mechanics of that game. The story is, I think, one of my favorite stories, and it of course has that great like halfway through the game twist that if you haven't played it, I'm not going to spoil it here. Maybe if the game makes it past Logan's veto and into kind of discussions in the future and stuff, we might discuss it. But like the characters are also what stand out for me and really set the tone for the BioWare games that I would love kind of moving forward. One of which is already on our list is Mass Effect 2. Like you have kind of characters like Bastilla and Karth Onasi as kind of your initial Jedi and like Han Solo type characters that kind of join you in your party. HK-47 is one of the funniest written characters I think in all of gaming. Kind of a very homicidal version of C-3PO, basically, where he just refers to every human as meatbags and he just wants to kill so many of them. And yeah, it was just a fun game. I was like looking back at it to kind of think about some of the things I would really want to highlight. One of the things that this game introduced that I wish would make a return, because it is my very favorite lightsaber color, was you could get silver lightsabers. And I
Nice.
very much like, if I could get any lightsaber color, that would be the one I would want, because it just had such a unique feel and look to it. And yeah, it is, I think, one of like, I'd have to go back and play it now to compare it against Jedi Fallen Order, but it's certainly up there in the upper echelon of Star Wars video games. And so yeah, that is what I'm bringing to the table. Anybody else played it?
I have, yeah. KOTOR is one of my favorite games of all time. I think it really is up there for anybody who's played it. As far as the story goes, especially considering the fact that this is a game that has, I think, stood out and been a defining game within the Star Wars video game series. Granted, it's not the most storied franchise to be embodied in video games, but I think that what it does from beginning to end is tell a story that is... It shows how good this game was, because it basically becomes somewhat of a prototype for this kind of story that BioWare would continue to tell. This is the first one where they tell a story about, like, the generic BioWare story, the template that basically so many other BioWare games have gone off of, that it's become so formulaic. It's gotten to the point now where, like, it's gotten to the point to where this is where it all came from. That's a weird way of saying this. Anyway, this is the original BioWare story. This is the original game that set them on the map. This is the bar by which all other Star Wars games, in my opinion, are judged by, regardless if they're RPGs or not. I think that the introduction of a Baldur's Gate-like system of RPG mechanics to Star Wars was such a novel idea, and it was such a big leap for LucasArts to trust a studio like this to do it. I'm granted, looking back on it, I'm sure the people at LucasArts were fans of Baldur's Gate, and when somebody said Baldur's Gate and Star Wars, they were like, "Oh, that's a great idea." But it it also is a point to note that it tells stories that are very intrinsic to what you get out of a Star Wars story, like a true Star Wars story. And it has the ability to tell a wonderful and heartfelt story about, and it deals with things that are really cool in the Star Wars canon, like Exar Kun, because Exar Kun's war, his Sith War, happened like within 100 years of this game. You have the Mandalorian Wars, like you have like all this awesome stuff that happens before the game even starts, but it has such an impact, and it really feels like you're playing in a lived-in world. Just a stellar game, stand out, the story of the character, the reveal behind it, but also probably like one of the best moments in that game is you start off where you're with just some dude who is like, oh, I woke you up, don't worry, like we're gonna get out of here. And then you come face to face with a Sith Lord, and you're like, oh no. And you have to book it. Like, you have to, leave that guy behind. It's just such a cool, like, that's the first opening moment, is like, you wake up on a ship that's being attacked, and it leads you off from there to a story that is just incredible. Just downright incredible. And I cannot, like, my best friend in high school and I picked it up for the PC at Barnes & Noble, or not Barnes & Noble, at Bookman's, which is a small chain of like used books, games, and music in Phoenix. And we picked it up for like $20. We split it, and we went back to my house and we installed it, and we played that game for like probably like 5 or 6 hours, just trading off and like just watching the story unfold. And it was just such an incredible game. Just some of my favorite Star Wars moments are in this game.
Yeah. How about you, Frank?
Yeah, I haven't played it, but I've definitely heard a little bit about it. I definitely like the twist you're talking about, and just kind of some of the other things that have already been mentioned have like kind of been things I've heard. But like, I definitely uh, I agree with the how it like. I agree with that. It kind of was like the foundation of what BioWare kind of like became, or at least like what a lot of people started with. But I feel like where it's kind of hard for me is like where I haven't gone back to it and played it is I feel like it's maybe not as aged as well as some of the other games. Like, I don't know if you got anyone agrees with me on that, but that I feel like I haven't gone back to play it just because of some of the things of like just mechanics and gameplay and just the way it looks. Like it's a little bit older.
Oh yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. I remember even like around the end of that generation or something, or going into like the PS3 or sometime in the PS3 era, I went back and played that, and it felt like an old kind of feeling game just because of how quickly games have progressed and how control styles of those games have progressed. So it like yeah, it definitely is one of those games that gameplay mechanic wise might not hold up as well or feel as tight as their later games become. But for the time and the era that it kind of came out, I think it certainly stood out.
I will make an additional point that the PC version is moddable. And like all early BioWare games, they were super open to modders, and we're talking about like the glory days of when you could mod a video game, and like the community and the company itself would love you for it. And so there's tons of like really cool mods that kind of fix some bugs that the development team doesn't have the time or resources to go back to. Like, there's an inventory management system, so you can give yourself a lightsaber from like the get-go. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do to kind of change up that game to the point where you even have the ability to like, there's even expansions that people created out of the game. And it is something that I would definitely say is worth playing. Either like on PC, it's on sale all the time, so it's super cheap to get it off of Steam. And the best part is because the graphics it's an Xbox era game, so the graphics aren't too intense for anybody's computer. My family's old busted computer was able to play it at a pretty good rate, so I would definitely say are the mechanics of the game, like the actual built-in mechanics, dated somewhat. This is an older style of game. I don't think like this is something that I would say like, oh well, the mechanics of these kinds of games have like made leaps and bounds forward. This is a very stylistic choice of mechanics, I feel, where it is based off of an RNG rollable die system that is intrinsic to older Baldur Gate games that BioWare produced and made. So it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't feel dated so much as it's like going back and playing an old style of game that nobody makes anymore.
I definitely think based on like what I've heard and just like based on even things that have been said on the podcast that like it deserves kind of like to be regarded and put on the list. But just from my personal perspective of just having missed it at the time and just kind of how quickly everything evolved since then, I've always found it like that's what I feel like that's just in one of the games that's like, and it may be definitely worth it. I just for me that's always been in kind of the list of like it just didn't age well enough for me to go back and try to because even if I don't have anything against going back and playing it, but it's not I feel like you just lose some of what was there, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's like I guess before we dive over to you, Logan, as the one who can veto stuff, other notable like obviously we have other notable Star Wars games that this would be eliminating, such as currently Jedi Fallen Order. I don't think that would make the list, and actually on given the consoles we have available could not make the list, but you also have like your Battlefronts and your uh, TIE Fighter versus X-wing, if that's on anything.
It's
There's
only on
also
PC.
I would
You
also
can't
give a
get it.
Episode
shout
one
out
racer.
to yeah, Episode One Racer on the N64, sure. I would give a shout out to like the various arcade games of Star Wars over the years.
Oh,
Um,
Shadows of the Empire would get eliminated.
yeah, Shadows of the Empire would be out there, and then also just obviously like the original Xbox. I don't think is a console that like any of us really spoke to all that much, but some of the other standout games that I had, I want to say, would have been like like obviously Halo's the big one, but I never really got
Mhm.
into Halo, especially not in that era. But Forza, what are some of the other original Xbox games?
Blinks the Time Sweeper. Blinks the Time Sweeper 2.
So I will say this, and this will be my last bit on. You can have teal lightsabers or aqua colored lightsabers in KOTOR. Boom.
Yep,
That's it. That's it. That's all you need.
yep.
Silver and aqua slash teal, and then if you can mod it, you can have a black lightsaber like that has like a silver aura around it. Like, come on.
Yeah,
Like,
I would also love the dark saber from Clone Wars, but that's yeah, I don't count that as like a canon in the game. But anyway, other original Xbox games beyond Good and Evil, Fable, of course, would have been a big one. I already mentioned Burnout. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else worth mentioning. Crimson Skies is one like I heard about a lot, but I never played it. So yeah. Anyway, throw it over to you, Logan. Any thoughts from you? Have you played the game?
Yeah, you chose the kind of game that I almost most didn't want you to pick. In terms of me having the veto,
Uh huh.
because it's this weird game where like I inherently don't want to veto it. But like so like no, I have not played Knights of the Republic because it's never been on any other platform other than Xbox or like PC. But like so things I don't own basically. I would love to. I've wanted to play the game for approximately 16 years now, realistically. But everything about that I've heard about the game and seen about the game, I've loved. Right, like as somebody who is a massive, 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 massive Star Wars fan. Like I love the idea and concept and mythology around like Star Wars in general, but this like Knights of the Republic games and like series in general. I think that yeah, it is a really interesting game. Like I had two consoles in my mind that I was most kind of leaning towards picking for my pick here, which come up next. Um, and the Xbox is one of them. Um, it is that weird thing for me where I think Knights of the Republic is a great pick. I think I absolutely can sit on this list of 20 games and be a legitimate contender to make an impact and make it far on the list. But I also have two of the games I was going to pick, and then it's the thing like, well, do I think these games are better than it or not? And I don't know. I think that, yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, like, I won't veto this game. I think that it's too. I think the Cowboy is too good. I think the Impact of it is too good. I think the Legacy of it is too good. I think the fact that it probably is in the run for being the best Star Wars game ever made, if not the best. I think it's definitely a worthy inclusion on the original Xbox, which is a platform maybe a bit more bereft of kind of iconic games compared to some other consoles. Yeah, I mean, I have no objections to it ultimately, and I'm okay letting my kind of Xbox picks that I had in my mind step aside.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm just looking at the other original Xbox games that I have down here, and I see Simpsons Hit and Run is another one that I spent a ton of time playing on that original Xbox, also multi-platform and stuff. So
Yeah,
could have been elsewhere. And Road Rage, we've joked a couple times I think over the course of the series of Crazy Taxi, and Road Rage just being like a Simpsons reskin of Crazy Taxi was a ton of fun for like the kind of game that it was trying to be. But yeah, like I I I knew kind of knowing that you have the veto and that like you could basically effectively veto me or Cameron. I specifically I think went with this um, uh,
Damn it.
in part because like I had a couple other games that I could have picked, but I went with this one because I felt uh, like so few of us do have that Xbox kind of background.
Yeah.
So if we could, obviously, in the grand scheme of things, they can only be on the list 3 times anyway, with the Xbox, the 360, and the Xbox One. And given that our 360 choice was BioShock, and then the Xbox One choice was Mass Effect 2, I was like, we haven't really given any kind of love to a true Xbox exclusive. So that was another reason I wanted to try and put it out there for consideration.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, yeah, it's a great pick.
And I just don't think any of us were really Halo guys to get behind.
That's
Like,
the thing. Not just gonna be like both of the games I was gonna look at for the Xbox, the OG Xbox, were both multi-platform games that I played on the PS2. But then we're like, well, these are also Xbox games, so it's like,
yeah, it was like the when I look at like top Xbox lists, like KOTOR's up there, right in the conversation with Halo and Halo 2. And just I didn't play either of those games until they came to the Master Chief Collection on the Xbox One.
same.
And by then they both felt, going back to the conversation of like a game feeling dated, they felt very dated to me, coming to them finally on this generation. And I'm sure like for the time, and obviously the big thing with them is and was always the multiplayer, and that's just never going to be my thing. But the campaigns themselves just didn't do it for me in an era where I've already played so many more modern feeling games than that have been inspired by Halo. So I couldn't, just like, I have no doubt that Halo games will be on like future seasons of this list, but I didn't think it didn't really make sense for our version of this list to put it out there.
My original choice of what I was actually going to choose for my game was Halo 2, so... but actually, I think KOTOR is a better choice.
All right. So if Logan's going to let it stand, then Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic makes its way onto our list. And we'll go ahead and kick it over to you, Logan, for your final selection for this list.
So I just want to make sure, because I can't remember, is the GameCube still available?
GameCube, yes. We have not picked
Okay.
anything for the GameCube because
Okay, well then,
Wind Waker, Frank specifically put the Wii U version of it onto the list. So GameCube is good to go.
I'll say this. I'm leaning between the NES and the GameCube for what I'm gonna pick, and it's tough. If I go the NES route, there are definitely some trolley options I can pick because I can just do it.
Very true.
And there are also just some good games here. If I go the GameCube route, it'll unquestionably be a game that nobody expects me to pick for the GameCube, which I also appreciate.
Gonna guess Beautiful Joe.
Nailed me, man. I love that game. Cameron, what are you looking at for your pick?
I'm looking at an NES game, so...
You're looking at NES game. I feel like Cameron's gonna pick some obscure that's gonna get it vetoed probably. I'm gonna go with the GameCube. Um,
Wow.
I'm gonna go with the GameCube
Something obscure that's
Because
definitely
it-
going to get vetoed. Oh, jeez.
because it matters to. It's a series that matters more to me. And then out of these two games, I'm gonna go. Actually, let me make sure real quick. But I'm gonna go with the GameCube. I think, yeah. And then on that, I'm going to go. Yeah, I'm gonna go James Bond 007 Nightfire.
Wow. Okay.
What?
And
You should veto your own game.
no,
with
no,
that
no, no, no,
choice.
no.
No, that is a Logan ass pick.
That
No,
is
and, like,
such a
I
Logan
thought-
pick.
The debate was between, and still is in a lot of ways. I can very much be convinced to not like the debate is between Nightfire or everything or nothing. Like it's gonna be a James Bond video game
Jeez, of course it is. Of course it is, Logan.
because I think that James Bond video games are almost as old as the video game industry itself. That they've been around for 30 plus years. I think that people, when they think of James Bond video games and the best James Bond video games of all time, wrongly go to GoldenEye, which is not, nor has it ever been, as good of a game as people think it is. And I think that the effects of people's kind of worship of GoldenEye is that like we've gotten a lot of bad video games that are James Bond games because people try to mimic what GoldenEye was. And the problem is that like GoldenEye wasn't a good video game. It's like the definition for me when I think of like the difference between like an important video game and a good video game. GoldenEye is an important video game. It's never been that great, and it's basically unplayable now.
I just to jump in on that because I imagine listeners
People are freaking out.
are
I've
angrily
made this argument
commenting.
for years, though.
And I know like we've talked in passing about kind of your
Yeah.
disdain for GoldenEye, but
I don't hate GoldenEye at all.
Yeah,
to be
but
clear.
for maybe our audience who does like what specifically of it are elements that you didn't like or that don't hold. Obviously, like the shooting mechanics of any
Yeah.
game of that era are certainly a
In
lot rougher
64.
to deal with
Yeah.
these days in a dual analog world. But I went back and played it, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, seems like. And because that was a game like I played so much GoldenEye with
Yes.
friends. That was like
Mhm.
the peak of high school, middle school era for me, where like I would go to my friend Luke Ortega's house, and every week or like multiple times a week, we would just hang out and just play endless rounds of GoldenEye. And it's a game that I never actually had myself until 10 years ago or something like that, when I went through and started buying up some like nostalgia fueled games like that, and replayed when I like rediscovered my N64 or something like that. And so that was the first time I really, outside of maybe I'd rented it once or twice from Blockbuster and played through some of the campaign stuff, but
Mhm.
like I really enjoyed the campaign of that game, and the specifically how like the missions had to play out differently based on how difficult you were trying to set the level.
Mhm.
Like you would have to go and do different things depending on if you were playing like Secret Agent or 00 Agent or whatever. And so that was one of the like I really enjoyed the campaign of that game, even above and beyond all the time we put into the multiplayer maps and whatnot. So like and that was something that I went back and did, like I said, 10 years ago now. And still had a great old time doing it. Yeah, the escort missions with Natalia and stuff, terrible, but yeah, that was just kind of, and those escort missions have continued on into this era where they still suck off a lot of the time. So, but for you in particular, like what were elements that just that don't hold up or don't resonate with you?
Yeah, I think that the game story, I disagree a bit more in that. Like, I think the story is fine. I think actually playing through the campaign is less fine. I think the game is pretty opaque. I think it's not clear what to do at significant points in times. I think like the snow-based levels are a mess.
That's
I
fair.
I don't really think they function appropriately. I think that there are good missions in that game, but there's a lot that isn't good. I think it's so easy to get lost. I think that the multiplayer, which is kind of the big bread and butter, I think if you play 4-player multiplayer on that game now, you're gonna migraine in 10 minutes. It's just this major spinning around, and like it's the speeds and all the players, I think, is off. The controlling the weapon is off. I think navigating is off. The maps are too big, almost universally for the amount of people that are playing them. I think that GoldenEye isn't bad. It's just they're better James Bond video games, and that those video games are ignored because they're ones that are a bit less like GoldenEye, right? Like, I think I think Nightfire does everything GoldenEye does, and I think it does it significantly better. I think it's got a way more fun and enjoyable and refreshing story. I think it's got a way cooler cast of characters in it. I think that its multiplayer is the best in the entire series, and is like criminally slept on, right? Because like for me, Nightfire was one where it's like that is my GoldenEye, right? Where like I was alive when GoldenEye came out, and I played GoldenEye in 64, and I owned that game and played the shit out of it. But like Nightfire was one where like it was me at like my best friend at the time, Brandon Neptune's house, and we'd go there, and we would just play Nightfire until like deep into the night, just again and again and like learning those maps over and over and over again. Those maps are like perfectly sized to like the amount of people playing them, right? And like Nightfire was one of the first ever video games I remember playing where like you could add in bots to like fill up the map more. Instead of like having the two of us play and then adding in like 4 bots to go against at the same time, like all like competing and challenging against each other and like fighting each other. And then they're going against like the ravine map where you could only have like human characters. And so like the two of us like doing these like crazy battles there, right? And like I think the weapon variety is really like special on that, but like not like gimmicky like I think GoldenEye's is at times. I think that the maps are like perfect in a lot of the cases for the multiplayer. I think the different kind of game types you can do in Nightfire are better than there in GoldenEye. I think that the like mission selection itself in terms of the campaign is better. I think the campaign is so tight and is so on point. Like there are still missions that are less good than others, obviously, but like I think in the whole that game builds very well. And I think it is just a thoroughly enjoyable, like great action video game for the era. I think Everything or Nothing is the best James Bond story in the entire video game series. The problem with Everything or Nothing is that like its multiplayer is not good. That's where its weakness becomes. But like the story in Everything or Nothing, and also the fact that like Everything or Nothing basically broke the rules of a James Bond video game and was a third-person action adventure like shooter kind of thing, and wasn't a first-person in your vein thing like basically every other James Bond video game has been for the most part. Makes it so good. It's so it's that story's legitimately great. And how like it ties into like the film series and how it ties into like a movie from like 20 years ago when it had come out. Like that Everything or Nothing story is better than at least a half dozen, if not more, James Bond movies, and it's so good and it's so tight, and like it's a great Pierce Brosnan Bond story. But its multiplayer is just so weak, and just they didn't know what they wanted to do with it, and it'd been better if it just didn't have one. But I feel like they had to like shoehorn a multiplayer in because it's a James Bond video game. But like Everything and Nothing is great, but like I'm picking Nightfire because Nightfire is one for me where like it just all of the boxes are checked off so well, and like to Cam's point of like I should veto this game because like it's a goofy dumb pick. It's like, yeah, but like here's the thing, it's not like James Bond is like as a series of games are like so tied into video games, especially through like the PS2 maybe early PS3 era. Like
What?
I mean, like GoldenEye is one of the most important video games of all time. Like it's like that's inarguable, and like I think that Nightfire and I think that Everything or Nothing and I think that Agent Under Fire are like really great PS2 video games that I would stack up against basically any of the other first-person shooters on that console. Like I legitimately would. Like I think they're great first-person shooter action like games, and like I think that they like all of these games are, and like Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough for like the N64 PS1 era too. Like these are great or not great video games. They're important video games, and I think that they're to me like when I think the like the PS2 or like the GameCube or the Xbox, like that early 2000s era, I inevitably think of like I think of GTA and I think of Jack and Dexter and I think of Medal of Honor and then I think of these James Bond video games, right? And like it's that thing for me where it is one where I think they're just great video games that don't get the shout outs they should because they're like movie tie-in franchise games, and those just like, kind of inherently get less respect. I feel like, which is usually fair. But they're great video games. And like I think Nightfire in particular is like that is the Nightfire is a video game where it's like, yeah, like control wise and like gameplay wise, like it's like it is a 2003 video game, and like it's age, and it's not like the greatest thing ever, but like I legitimately think that if like we got like the four of us come together right now and play Nightfire for like more than like 10 or 20 minutes, we'd have a ton of fun. We'd have a blast, and we could just play the game for like 2 to 3 hours. Like I think we would have so much fun playing that game now. So like the game at its core is still really fun, right? And in the same vein where we're talking about like Knights of the Old Republic is a game that's like maybe age and like mechanically I don't know how great it still is. I think the same could be true for like Nightfire, where it's like mechanically, like yeah, like it's a video game from 2 generations ago, 16 years ago, just like Knights of the Republic, but like the core of what that game is great and fun, right? And like I think it to me that's sort of what defines that era of games for me is like these goofy, fun, over the top, like action packed games defined the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox like OG era for me, and like Nightfire is like the epitome of that in a lot of ways. Plus, like, I love James Bond. That's the thing. Like, I love James Bond. I'm here saying like Nightfire is a great James Bond video game, and like I've talked to Trevor about this numerous times. But it's like there aren't a lot of great James Bond video games. I'd argue there are 2 great James Bond video games, and it's Nightfire and Everything or Nothing. And even those have issues with them. And so I think that like I'm not somebody who's just being like every James Bond video game is great. It's like nah, most James Bond video games are bad. Most of them are very bad, but some of them are good. And like I think those deserve recognition and shoutouts. And like that to me is like the point of this list and like the structure of how we organize it. Where it's like different kinds of games can get shouts, like weirder kind of games, more niche kind of games can get shoutouts. And like to me, that is this. Like, is Nightfire the greatest GameCube game ever made? I have no idea. Like, I don't really. That is a meaningless question to me. I can say that it is a great GameCube game, that it's a ton of fun to play, and that I think that people still have vivid memories of it and are passionate about it years later. And like that to me is a testament of what a good video game is, and a video game that deserves to be on an ultimate video game list and get some sort of recognition. So that's my defense of the game. And since I'm the one with the veto, it's on the list too.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Go ahead, Cameron. Say your piece on the matter.
Yeah, come at me, Cameron.
I'll say this. 3 things I'm going to say. One, I found it interesting to note because I was like, was there an earlier Bond game than GoldenEye? Turns out, yeah, the first one was actually made in 1983 by Parker Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I found that out. That's interesting to note. Secondly, like here's the thing. If like first off, I need to like pinch myself and Trevor tell me who is the current. Never mind. That's a bad way of going about it. I was gonna be like, I must be in an alternative timeline where like Robert Redford's the president because to state that James Bond video games are like would you say that you said they were like a backbone of the video game industry?
I said they're. I didn't say that. I said they're like an important part of the development of the video game industry, and I think that's to me largely inarguable.
I think outside of GoldenEye, I don't see that argument, but that's fine. I don't have a veto. And the third thing I'll say is, really for the first time, I regret using my veto so early.
I mean, I think that like that's whatever, but like. Yeah, you burned your veto, and it's that thing too. Like I can, like it's that thing. Like yeah, like
Frank,
whenever
I'm sorry.
Whenever I said
you should have gotten
3 episodes ago, and I was like, or 2 episodes ago, whatever it was, like, you got like all these 3 vetoes. Where it's like these are going to be the games that I'm going to pick. Like it's not like I'm not going to pick some like crazy like fucking like scandalous game. It's going to be like no, I'm going to pick a game that I love that most people just don't think about.
Yeah.
And that to me is the epitome of Nightfire. That is the epitome of a game that is like yeah like. This is like when Trevor pitches like excuse me, it was when we got to these rounds, it was like picking games where it's like, yeah, like this kind of style of game where like Touch Effect for You or these kind of games that like maybe wouldn't be on anybody else's list in the show. That's kind of the entire point.
I will say to GameCube fans everywhere, I'm sorry that this is our representative.
I don't think you should be, right? Like it's like thing like Nightfire is a great video. It's not just me just saying. It's like Nightfire is a great video game. Like it is a game where it's like, I don't know. Like I think people like Nightfire. Like it's not just I'm not just
Who?
out here being like people. I mean, like it's a video game that like reviewed well at the time, and like more than that, it's a video game that is
Yeah, I looked at the reviews. It got like relatively okay scores.
yeah. But that's I think petition. It's gotten like 8s, and it's like I think that is a video game that like every genre video game since like 1990 like 6 or 7 whatever it's been in the shadow of GoldenEye, and that's my entire point is that like GoldenEye shouldn't be the basis on which every genre video game is made and reviewed against, but it is, and it still is 20 years later. And I've talked to Trevor about this numerous times, but it's like I've wanted to make a video essay or write a feature about how fucked the James Bond video game series is because of GoldenEye for like 5 years. Like the entire series is fucked because one game came out and it became the gold standard, even though it was never as good as people thought it was. And like that to me is like more of like why I get like annoyed about GoldenEye is because like the game isn't as good as you think it is. It never was, and more importantly, it screwed up the entire series where we can't have games that are different than GoldenEye because then people get angry and it's like, yeah, but this game isn't what you think it is. That's my point. Is like you get games like Everything or Nothing that actually do like just like stuff completely different, like have like a fundamentally different kind of multiplayer, which to be fair wasn't great, and also like a fundamentally like it focuses on a story, doing a cool campaign, doing third person, not first person, change up combat, change up all this kind of stuff, and it's great. But people complain because it's not like GoldenEye. And it's
Logan,
like,
are you is this just because it's basically like the James Bond Uncharted game? Is that why you love this?
I mean, like, kind of, but like, here's the thing: like, Uncharted's great, and we could have great James Bond third-person game. Like, I think that like From Russia with Love is another one that's a third-person game that's really good, and like, I think whenever this series tries to do different things, it gets fucked up by its inability to not be like GoldenEye enough. And like, that's my point: is that like, I think we need to get off of GoldenEye's dick a little bit and be like, hey, like, maybe this game from the N64, which is already a console, it's kind of trash to begin with, isn't that great. Like, that's my thing, is like, genuinely, like, the N64 isn't as good as anybody thinks it. Like, it's not as good as you remember it being. Like, it's not. Like, the console's like 5 games that are on it that are good. Like, you need to chill out, everybody. It's fine. And so, like, I think it's true of GoldenEye 2, which is not as good as people think it is. And, like, I think Nightfire is a legitimately really good video game. It's a great video game. And, like, I would absolutely, like, I would bet all the money in the world that if you put people in a room for 1 hour and made them play Nightfire's multiplayer versus GoldenEye's multiplayer and asked them which was more fun when they came out, the vast majority would say Nightfire.
Wait,
and if
when the games came out?
Right now in 2019,
okay.
Which one is more fun to play right now, they're going to say Nightfire. And if they don't, I think they're full of shit. I think they're just trying to be like, no, like, this game from when I was a kid is better just because, like, I was a kid when I played. And it's like, nah, but, like, what is actually better, right? Like, I'm the curmudgeon out here for years anyway who's been like, y'all got this weird, dumb night vision, like, rose-tinted glasses about Nintendo games to begin with. And I think that's true about the N64 and about GoldenEye in general, right? Like, this is my, like, heated game moment here where it's like, all these games aren't as good as you think they are, right? Like, The Legend of Zelda 1 isn't as good as you think it is. Most of the shit in the SNES isn't as good as you think it is. Some of it is, but, like, some of it isn't. And, like, the N64 in general and GoldenEye particularly aren't as good as you think it is. Like, take off your glasses and be like, hey, maybe these things that I played as a kid aren't great. And, like, maybe it's just because I came to games later. Like, I didn't start playing games until I was, like, 7 or 8. Like, I came in, I feel like, later than a lot of people do. But it's like, these things aren't that great. And, like, some of them are. Like, Dr. Mario is a masterpiece. It's a 10 out of 10. But, like, Super Mario World maybe isn't, or like maybe it is, but like actually just play it and they'll just be like, oh, like I was a kid so I love it and I love it forever. It's like, yeah, but is it good still? And the answer to me is that like no for GoldenEye, yes for Nightfire, and that's why Nightfire is my representative of the GameCube. Because to me, when I look at the 3 games for that era now of Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Knights of the Old Republic, and yeah, Nightfire, I'm totally happy with that 3 list because I think that is what defines that era for me. These games that have of ambition and fun and goofiness and silliness and over the top and being absurd and being grandiose and being epic, and having a lot of fun playing. And like I think those games I'm totally okay defining that era. And again, this entire competition is moot because I'm the guy with the veto, and I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
Before I
yeah.
throw it over to you, Frank, real quick, would this have been your Xbox choice if I hadn't jumped in with KOTOR? Is it the same game?
Ironically enough, possibly. I was also thinking again, like if I hadn't been this, I'd have gone Medal of Honor European Assault, right? Like I'd have gone a Medal of Honor route, right? Which is another series that I think is like criminally underappreciated. But like, so it'd have been that or Medal of Honor.
Yeah, no, I love the pick because it very much reflects like the spirit of that I hoped for when I kind of like
Yeah.
came up with this idea is when we get down to the end of this list, we're looking at games that are obscure out of
Mhm.
necessity and almost out of necessity. And I like that's not to take away at all your love of this
No,
game,
not
but
at all.
it's
Not at
certainly
all.
a game I'd never heard of because as you pointed out, so many of these games live in the shadow of GoldenEye,
Yeah.
and that was pretty much where like multiplayer kind of ended for me anyway. Was that era,
Yeah.
just because of the age that I was, and then the fact that systems started moving online, and you lost like arcades, and you lost couch co-op for
Yeah.
or couch multiplayer for basically a couple generations before we started
Generations,
bringing them
yeah.
back in indie games and stuff. But
Yeah,
anyway,
so yeah, can I just want to say one thing.
No.
Oh, okay.
no,
No,
yes,
no,
go
no,
ahead,
no,
go
yeah,
ahead and say your
Okay,
one thing.
sorry.
That's what I'm saying.
I
That's
thought you'd be like,
yeah.
I thought Logan was like, no, I have the
no,
veto.
yeah.
You don't. Shh.
No.
So first off, Logan, I love you. I love you so much, and that's the only reason I'm not trolling you right now with some comments that I thought of. But the only thing that I would mention is to compare GoldenEye and Nightfire. We're talking about 7 years of technology and difference.
Yeah. Sure.
I will just make that point in defense of GoldenEye, which is a moot point, but
I
that
love
being
that.
said, like,
I love that
yeah.
Cam thinks he hasn't been trolling Logan, as if pretty much all of Cam's comments through this like segment of the show have been like, "Well, Cameron is pretty much just resigned to the fact that Logan's going to veto whatever he brings to the table next."
That's the thing. Like I'm not necessarily again like if Cameron has a great game, I'm okay just walking off my veto. Like it's fine, but like I think that
Does that mean you get 2 vetoes next time?
No.
You're on.
exactly. If I come back next season, I think that the thing for me is that like that's true. Like that point isn't invalid, but like I don't think it's used in other series, right? Like I don't.
No,
I think
I was just.
I think
making a
I think people can compare Zelda games and be like, yeah, like we're comparing a game from 1980 whatever and Breath of the Wild. Like, what is your favorite Zelda game, right? It's thinking like this is my answer. This is what my answer is for what my favorite James Bond game is. It is
Cool.
Nightfire and Everything or Nothing, right? And like so, I think it's a legitimate comparison in that regard. I would
Sure.
also just like to say that like again, this isn't like. There are a lot of good games from this era, right? That I think, like again, like the PS2 we knocked out early. I knocked it out early. In fact, again, also after vetoes were blown, and it was a thing to me where it's like this whole era to me of games that those 3 consoles has like the widest library ever. It feels like that library is so eclectic. It is so all over the place. It is so immense. Like the games are just fucking weird from the early 2000s, and I wanted the list to be reflective of that, right? So like if I hadn't picked this game, I'd have gone hunting for like War of the Monsters or Area 51 or like these kind of, or like Medal of Honor or this kind. Like I wanted a weird game from that era on this list because that is what like is reflective of that, or like Cold Winter, like something weird from that era because that era was really fucking weird. It's a weird era, and like I think that GTA Vice City and Knights of the Republic are probably the 2 best games from that era, but they're not necessarily the weirdest games from that era. And like I wanted something that is like a bit more outside the mainstream kind of shout out thing. Like, and I think that Nightfire fits in that void, also fits in being like a well known game to a degree, and also just is like again a fun game. Like it's a weird era. Let's get some weird picks in there, is what I would say.
Yeah.
Frank, what do you got to say?
Frank, anything to add? I'm guessing you're in the same boat as the rest of us and that you haven't played this, but feel free to surprise me there.
Yeah, no, honestly, I am in the same boat with you guys. I haven't played this one, although I definitely think I have played. I have a lot of love for Everything or Nothing, and
Hell yeah,
Agent
my
Under
guy.
Fire. I didn't love like as much, but
Yeah.
like I did definitely own that one. But So I do have like a huge amount of appreciation for not only James Bond but those games as well, like that era that Logan's talking about, and I kind of agree with like some of what he said. But I haven't played Nightfire myself. Although, even just kind of briefly looking at it while you guys have been talking, like I definitely kind of agree with what he was saying. Is that it definitely between that and GoldenEye, I assume this is probably easier to go back to.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I just want to throw out some GameCube games that will not then be on this list. Just worth mentioning. Obviously, I think Super Smash Bros. Melee is one of the big ones.
That's the one. I love you, and I'm afraid of what the Melee fans are going to do to you.
Here's the thing. And like honestly, like this is the thing again that I'm just gonna come out and say now. Like this, we've done one where it's like, you know what, fuck this. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, here's like, two of my hottest takes in gaming. GoldenEye isn't even the best video game named GoldenEye out there, because the Wii remake of GoldenEye is better than the N64 remake. It's like better than the N64 original of GoldenEye. So GoldenEye's not even the best GoldenEye video game. A and B, y'all need to fucking chill out with Smash. You need to chill out with Smash. Like it's okay. The game is good. Y'all whining about Smash. About all these Smashes. All of them. Just take a chill pill, alright? Like, it ain't the fucking best anything. It's a good video game, alright? Like, I know how to, like, raving about Mario Kart. It's fine. Everybody just bring it down a few notches, okay? I think
And
Mario
you're
Party's
bringing
great.
a Mario Kart to this? Jeez.
I think Mario Party is great. You don't see me out here being like, Mario Party is the definitive game on anything. It's not. It's okay.
More than anything, this segment has made me want to bring back hot pepper hot takes. And if we ever do that, like in a future Extra Life, I am definitely making you eat a habanero pepper, Logan, and spit out your GoldenEye take for the masses, because it's been delightful. Other highlights that I think worth mentioning: Metroid Prime. This is one of the many consoles that I think Resident Evil 2 could have been argued for.
Resident Evil 4.
Oh, Resident Evil 4
Yeah.
was on that one. Okay. Yeah. So, and then, like, I don't think it's for any of us, but like Pikmin. Yeah. I think all the other ones we've kind of struck based on the other games that we've put on. I was joking, but also I think Beautiful Joe for me was like one of my favorite games on the GameCube, and I think it speaks to that, like, the weird obscureness that you're talking about of that generation, as a just a great kind of also representation. But yeah, great. Well, with that, James Bond 007 Nightfire makes its way onto our list.
Laugh all the way to your pick, Cameron. You've been an asshole for like.
I look forward to potentially discussing James Bond 007 Nightfire a little bit more next week when we start ranking the list.
It's gonna be fun.
All right, Cam, hit us.
Oh my gosh.
Hit us with
right.
with your
Number 20
final pick.
Before we move on from GameCube, I just want to say shout out to Skies of Arcadia, unappreciated RPG. Next up.
All right.
Let's go ahead and talk about my pick. My pick is a classic. It is a game that is actually a sequel. It is one of those sequels that is considered definitively better than the game that came before it. It is a game that many people appreciate and have a deep feeling of love and connection to, and you could say that it's a progenitor of the kind of platforming games that we still see today. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about Mega Man 2 for the NES.
You fucking asshole.
All right.
What did you think I was going to say?
Something stupid that I would veto.
but you're actually on board for Mega Man 2?
That's the problem. Like, I wrote down 2 NES games after Dr. Mario got knocked off, and one of them was... I love Mega Man 2. That's a problem.
Yeah, Mega Man 2 is a great game. It's a classic.
It's a great video
If he had picked 3, would you have vetoed that just for the hope that Frank would pick 2?
It's weird because, like, Mega Man 2 is the only Mega Man game that I love. I think once they introduce the slide, I don't like the series as much.
That's fair. I think that's a fair complaint to have about it.
Yeah.
The slide mechanic does change a lot of like your run and gun shooter play that you get in 1 and 2. And 2, I think, is just a better as far as like they were better at managing cartridge space.
The soundtrack is better, I think.
Soundtrack is better. Dr. Wily is definitively like the best song out of the entire Mega Man series.
Woodman Stage is great too, though, that soundtrack.
Yeah. Oh, shout out to Megaran.
The homie.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Being literally the homie of homies. His cover and his remix of Dr. Wily is it explains the entire story of Mega Man and everything you need to know about Mega Man, but on top of that, it also just fucking slaps so hard. So everything from the beginning to end of Mega Man 2 is phenomenal. The bosses, the stages, the lack of the kind of like really hokey exploits in Mega Man 1 are missing, so you get a much more crisper, definitive gameplay from it. You don't have to worry about the frames, the entire next frame not loading correctly, and so you get killed by something random because of it. You have it's pure, it's original, it's classic good gameplay from a classic series that is just creme de la creme. If you wanted to distill down some classics, I mean, that's why I think it's one of the best games on the NES Classic when it came out.
Yeah.
To get that, so hands down, a big fan of it. Love it. It's my favorite Mega Man game. I think outside of maybe, I am a big fan of Mega Man X, the X series, 4 and 5 and 6 in particular. I know 5 and 6 get a lot of hate, but there's a lot of cool things that go into that as far as the breakdown of 0 and X and what happens there. But I digress. Mega Man 2 is just purely from the get-go, just beginning to end, just so great.
So my favorite thing about this is that Trevor doesn't like this pick. And now Trevor gets to be, it's like Cam is the defendant and Trevor's the prosecutor, and I'm out here being am I going to be this game now? Trevor, make your prosecutorial pitch here.
I mean, my pitch for you, Logan, would be that pretty much everything you said about GoldenEye is how I feel about Mega Man 2. And really all of Mega Man. Because so one of the very first games I reviewed for Trevor Trove when I started that years ago was the Mega Man Legacy Collection. And my review of that was effectively, if this game came out today, or these games came out today, everybody would tear them. If they were an indie game that launched today, they would be torn apart for how buggy they are, how glitchy, how badly designed certain aspects of those games are, and how brutally difficult they are. The reason we loved them growing up or as kids or whatever was because we had time to have to memorize every single enemy attack pattern in those games because we weren't going to get another game to play for another 2 or 3 months or something like that. So playing those Mega Man games, it was, okay, I can die over and over and over again, and when I finally get that one good run, I'm going to go ahead and write down the weird password bubbles thing that they used for saved games in those in that day, and I'm going to remember that, and that's how I'm going to come back because I'm inevitably going to die in the next stage or on the next boss or whatever, and the only thing that I think makes those games playable in the Legacy Collection is the quick save and rewind functionality that you have and stuff like that. I do not like how those games play. Everything feels super heavy in them today. And yeah, I just don't have the I loved them at the time. I know that 7-year-old Trevor had a great time playing through Mega Man 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's probably when I fell off, was around 5. But the old curmudgeon of me just looks back at those games in the same way that you're talking about GoldenEye, Logan, and just says there's a lot of problems with how those games are designed. They designed them knowing that the system couldn't do some of the things they were trying to make them do, and they said, well, fuck it, then we're just gonna do it anyway, and you're only going to be able to shoot 3 bullets, and that's the accommodation we're making because that's all that the game can fit because everything else we're trying to do isn't going to make this game work. So yeah, I know it just like GoldenEye, it is a very important game, and a lot of people hold it very near and dear, and just it doesn't hold up for me in that same style of it's not a fun game to go back to for me as someone who did it 4 or 5 years ago. That game was lots of headaches over the course of a week or two of just I hate all of this. This isn't fun anymore. I don't have 6 hours that I can do just trying to master my way through Woodman's stage or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of my frustration with Mega Man 2. But I'm even if I had a veto, this isn't something I would probably veto because I respect its place in this in history in a list like this. I would respect Mega Man being here as the NES representation. I was looking, like Nintendo or IGN has it in there like as number 4 in their top games of all time, top NES games of all time, only behind two Mario Brothers and a Legend of Zelda. So,
Boo!
I mean, yeah,
That's the trash.
that's fair. But
yeah, I think for me, I mean, again, like your complaints have always been valid, right? Like, and like an easier comparison you could have even gone for isn't the GoldenEye connection, although valid. It's the Legend of Zelda connection. How it's like the game is just like the best version of this game isn't the NES version. It's the Mega Man Legacy Collection version, right? Like,
I mean,
the
best version of this game is Shovel Knight.
Sure. The quick save feature makes the game so much more enjoyable. Because the game is hard as balls if you don't have that quick save feature. Like, it is so, like, it is not nearly as enjoyable to play it on the actual NES with not, like, you can't just quick save whenever you want to kind of thing. Like, it's not as much fun. And even still, it's hard.
Yeah, like even with Game Genie codes and stuff back in the day,
like
it was a pain in the ass of a game.
Yeah, the game is not easy. Like, it is. I think it's less opaque and less kind of stupidly confusing and baffling than Legend of Zelda is, but it's still an NES game, and it's kind of difficulty and puzzles and just everything about it. I think that's all valid. The $1 million question I have though is not for Cam, and it's not even for Trevor. It's Frank.
Yeah.
Dear Frank, my dear boy, if you have to make a pick, what is your game gonna be? And then we'll just go from there. What do you pick? If I veto Cam in a theoretical, hypothetical scenario here, what do you pick?
Frank, help me out. Say Oscar 120%.
Yeah, like what is your pick gonna be? That's the thing. Right?
Man, like it's tough because I already know whatever I have written down, I don't think I can beat what you feel for Mega Man 2. But what I was probably thinking about going with if it came down to me, because I wasn't sure what was going to get taken, I was honestly thinking about nominating Sayonara Wild Hearts for a mobile. I was also thinking about fighting for Resident Evil on GameCube, but I assumed one of you guys would take GameCube. Yeah, so yeah. I had my pick I thought I was going to use, and then I had some other ones just in case. I also wrote down Animal Crossing for either GameCube or 3DS, which is another one I would give a shout out to. But yeah, I don't think any of these picks are going to topple Mega Man.
I think for me, then, knowing that, what I'm going to say is I'm not going to veto Mega Man 2. Because I think those are solid picks. And I think it is important for me to note here, too. Like, somebody write down like the record that we're keeping for the show. All of Trevor's points are valid. Mega Man has significant flaws, especially if you jump into the game nowadays. It is everything I just said about GoldenEye. It's everything I rant and rave about Legend of Zelda. Although, to be clear, it is a significantly better video game than Legend of Zelda has always been. But I also think that, like, Mega Man 2 also just kind of, like, it's that thing, like, it just kind of slaps despite those things, too, right? Like, the game, like, especially, like, don't listen to our list. Play the Mega Man Legacy Collection. Play that version of it. In the same vein where it's like, realistically, you should play like Hellblade, probably not on the Switch. But like play the Mega Man Legacy Collection. But like Mega Man 2, I think is at the very least such an important video game. I think it's such a great video game at moments. I think the soundtrack is legitimately one of the greatest soundtracks in gaming history. It is flawed. It is buggy. It is broken. But the way that the game and the designers work around those flaws, I find really charming. I've always found really kind of clever. And so, like, I'm totally fine. I will not veto the pick, Cam. I'll just walk off into the sunset with my veto. So, Mega Man 2.
It's like I said, it's a worthy addition.
Yeah.
A few other Nintendo games I would want to pull here. The Nintendo game that I had on my list that I think I teased, maybe a few episodes back, would have been Dragon Warrior 4.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Which is I feel like that falls in the same vein a little bit of your 007 Nightfire pick, as like it's not the best known Dragon Warrior game or Dragon Quest game. but it is the first one that I came and got introduced to. I had a friend in fifth grade. My friend Nick and I, like, I traded him my copy of Final Fantasy IV or Final Fantasy II at the time on Super Nintendo for his copy of Dragon Warrior 4 because like we played a little bit of his house and I loved it and basically it was like, hey, let's trade these games. And then he ended up moving away like that summer and I never got my game back and I still have his copy of that game. But it's a game that I ended up buying Final Fantasy II again to like refill that collection. But Dragon Warrior 4 is just like it was such an interesting, different way to approach the JRPG game style for me. In that, like, that was a game where you played through different chapters of the game to like get introduced to what would by the final chapter be your full party of people, but it was like, hey, I'm going to tell you this guy's story. He's a knight. He's trying to save his land from a curse. I'm going to tell you this guy's story. He's a merchant, and he works in a shop. And, like, I spent so much time playing as Taloon the shopkeeper. Like, basically, like, the beginning of his chapter is you just work in his shop. People come in, and they sell you merchandise, and you can, like, resell it to other people and make a markup, and you get basically paid at the end of the day. And you can just do that for multiple days before you finally just go off and start actually doing your journey and you have to go into like caves and try and find stuff. But like that was such a weird little charming thing that I love and that still resonates and sticks with me to this day in Dragon Warrior 4, and it's just one of my favorites in that series. But other notable mentions I would say are Contra. Obviously, that gave us the Konami code, or certainly popularized the Konami code. Metroid again is another standout one that does not make our list anywhere. And Mike Tyson's Punch Out is another like just very fun one from that era that like like I mean there were so many like Micro Machines was like a fun racing game that I very much loved of that era.
Yeah, I'd also like to shout out, like, because again, like, I love the NES. That was, like, my big thing when, like, because I didn't own them, but, like, playing the NES Classic, like, I fell in love with that console in a way I did not expect. And so, like, I unironically love Bubble Bobble. I unironically think Ice Climbers is a ton of fun. So, like, Balloon Fight. If I hadn't picked Mega Man 2, the game I would have picked would have been Kirby's Adventure, which I think is a legitimately great platformer. And, like, even... Like, if when it had gotten to me and somebody had picked, like, the GameCube and the Xbox, I'd have gone the NES, and I very well could have picked Kirby's Adventure over Mega Man 2, because I think Kirby's Adventure is that good. I think it's that, like, tight and fun and joyful of a platformer. I obviously think that we couldn't pick it because of an earlier selection, but, like, I legitimately think Dr. Mario is fantastic. It is the video game that I played the most in the NES Classic. I played, like unironically, not like joking at all, probably close to like 70 hours of that game on the NES Classic. Just with me and one of my best friends at the time, back home when it came out, just sit on the couch together and just playing Dr. Mario rounds against each other again and again and again.
Fun fact for me on Dr. Mario, it because of your love and because we talked about it at some point, like it is I think one of the only games I've played with the like Switch Online NES collection.
Hell yeah, awesome. Yeah, like I love Dr. Mario, right? And like I think that like obviously like Super Mario Bros. 3 we couldn't do because of the selection, but like Super Mario Bros. 3 is like a phenomenal platformer. I think that the NES is so rich with such again like an eclectic mix of games. But like I'm also okay saying that for this list and the way that it's broken, the way that it's shaken out, I'm okay having Mega Man 2 represent that console.
Great. All right, that makes our list of 20 games. So if as I said earlier, if Logan had vetoed my pick or Cameron's pick here, Frank, it sounds like would have added Sayonara Wild Hearts or something like that to the list. But alas, Frank does not get a final selection. So just as a recap, the 20 games that we will start ranking next week are as follows. Persona 4 Golden for the PS Vita, Final Fantasy VI Game Boy Advance, The Last of Us PS3, BioShock Xbox 360, God of War PS4, Sonic 2 Sega Genesis, Pokemon Soul Silver Nintendo DS, Super Mario Galaxy 2 Wii, Castlevania Symphony of the Night PlayStation, Mass Effect 2 Xbox One, Portal 2 PC, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 Dreamcast, Grand Theft Auto Vice City PlayStation 2, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, Wii U, Earthbound, Super Nintendo, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, Switch, Tetris Effect, PlayStation VR, Knights of the Old Republic, Xbox, James Bond 007 Nightfire on the GameCube, and Mega Man 2 for the original Nintendo Entertainment System. That is a very
That's a hell of a
fun
list.
list of games, you
Yeah,
guys. I'm
it's a
very
great list.
excited for what we've come together with here over these last 6 weeks, and I very much look forward to starting to dive in and rank them next week. So that's what we'll be doing next week. We will start with games 20 through 16, trying to argue which are of these the bottom of this list as we slowly work towards our number one game of all time and all consoles and all that fun stuff. So yeah, let's have some fun as we shift into that mode next week. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of That Ultimate Video Game List Show. Thank you to everyone for joining me. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. Anything you want to shout out here, Logan?
Yes. You can go check out That Wannabe Film Class. When this episode of this podcast goes live, the newest episode of that would have been live the day before, and we are going to be talking about Inception. I am so excited to watch that movie again. I've not seen the movie in a few years. It is a movie that I really love. I'm excited to dive back into it again. Talk about how the big, much debated ending is stupid because it's very clear that they're not in a dream, they're in real life. Anybody thinks otherwise is stupid and doesn't understand what the movie's showing them.
Jesus,
I
Logan
think
is
that
out here making friends.
I'm
man.
fucking full of fire now because of you, Cameron, all right? I'm full of fucking fire and flames out here. This is the hot take episode. So I'm excited to watch the episode again. It's a great Chris Nolan movie. Maybe my second favorite Chris Nolan movie. So I'm excited for that. You can go check out That Nerdy Site Show. Yes. The newest episode of that will be live. Plus, there's been a Patreon bonus episode out there as well for you to check out. Do all these fun things. Then you can also go check out the actual site itself, where by this time next week, I will for sure will have a review of Won't You Be My Neighbor, the Mr. Rogers Tom Hanks movie that I'm going to be seeing tomorrow. Trevor's going to have some more reviews out there as well. I might have a Parasite review out as well.
Great. You can follow Cameron at RevCatbit. Anything you want to shout out?
As we learned last night, I shouldn't try to shout out something if I don't have anything, so no.
Okay. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes.
Yeah, you can follow me everywhere at Irrelevant Jokes. I guess that's all I have to plug for the moment.
Okay. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. Yeah, I'm going to just say shout out to whatever's on the site at this point. We did have fun last night as we're recording this. Cam, Frank, and I sat down and we recorded an episode of That Nerdy Site Show talking about Frozen 2. We talked a lot about that. And then we also did, as Logan alluded to, our Patreon early access episode for the end of November. So our patrons will get that for a month, talking about our Thanksgiving memories, and that'll go live for everybody end of December.
Thanks for the memory.
If you want to listen to that early, you can go support us on Patreon for $8 or above. So yeah, that's going to do it for this show. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site. Please, as I said at the beginning, especially as we're still in this early stage here, like, rate, review, subscribe everywhere you can. Follow us everywhere you can. Really helps us out. And as always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.